A $950 fine over a mailbox nearly ruined us until the police realized who they were actually dealing with. Our HOA president had been terrorizing neighbors with phony citations printed on premium stock that cost more than many car payments. She watched my wife break down, begging for mercy after evidence was planted in our home. The HOA Karen thought she'd won when my wife, in desperation, shredded that fake fine right in front of her. She had no idea what that act had unleashed. Comment if your HOA has ever hit you with suspicious, high-price fines that look too professional to be legitimate. Moving to Oakwood Heights felt like the suburban dream. Immaculate streets, strict standards, amenities that actually worked. Our realtor raved about the committed HOA president, Christine Roberts, who keeps property values high through meticulous oversight. What the realtor didn't mention was how Christine maintained those values, or who was bankrolling her polished operation. 3 days after we moved in, the first red flag appeared. Christine pulled up our driveway like she belonged on a lifestyle ad. Designer outfit, couture blazer, jewelry that caught the sun, and even citation gear that looked more corporate than backyard. Her voice carried the kind of authority that expects immediate compliance. "I'm Christine Roberts, HOA president. That mailbox requires architectural review board approval before any permanent mounting," she announced. On paper, it sounded like standard procedure. But Angela's instincts, sharp and forensic, flipped on immediately. The citation book was bound in leather, not the usual clipboard. Her pen was a gold-plated blank worth more than many people spend on groceries for weeks. The whole process felt rehearsed, performed with the same theatrical precision over and over. "Ma'am, every mailbox on the street looks identical," I said, pointing to the row of matching installs. "Superficial similarity doesn't guarantee covenant compliance with established community standards," Christine replied, writing what looked like a $25 fine in premium ink that shimmered on the page. When Angela examined the citation at the kitchen window, she recognized details most homeowners would miss. "Larry, look at this paper," she said, holding the document up to the light. "This isn't municipal stock. This is commercial paper with a woven watermark." The watermark was subtle but clear once you knew to look. CR Enterprises embedded into the fibers, like a corporate signature. The ink sat on the surface in a way that suggested top-tier printing, and the typesetting and font choices screamed corporate production rather than government forms. "CR Enterprises?" I asked as Angela photographed the watermark with methodical precision. "Most likely Christine Roberts Enterprises," she said in that clipped, clinical tone she uses when something doesn't add up. Someone was running a business out of volunteer work, spending real money on professional citation materials that cost more than many small businesses spend on office supplies all year. Angela's documentation exposed patterns that would have taken others weeks to spot. Over the next few days, she quietly traced identical premium citations around the neighborhood with the systematic focus of someone trained in document forensics. "I've found matching premium citations at least a dozen houses this month," she reported, spreading evidence across our dining table like a detective building a case. Same paper stock, same ink signature, sequential citation numbers, signs of centralized production, not ad hoc enforcement. Mrs. Anderson on Pine Street had 4 citations in 2 weeks, all printed on the same expensive stock. The elderly man 3 doors down got fined for mistimed holiday decorations on paper that cost more than his decorations did. When Angela tallied up the material costs, the financial picture turned frighteningly clear. Premium paper runs about $2 a sheet wholesale. Professional ink cartridges are $50 plus. That leather citation book likely cost over $100. Someone was spending thousands on citation materials every year, on top of Christine's designer wardrobe and high-end equipment. This wasn't volunteerism. It looked like a funded enterprise masquerading as community service. Who had the money and motive to run such an elaborate control system? The answer came one Tuesday night around 10 o'clock when an expensive black sedan slid into Christine's driveway as if it were a routine stop. From our kitchen window, I watched a sharply dressed man step out carrying a leather briefcase that matched Christine's aesthetic. Christine's meeting with someone important, I whispered. Angela appeared with a small pair of binoculars and began studying the visitor with precise focus. I made out a partial plate, something that looked like a government prefix, the kind used for official vehicles. The visitor stayed 90 minutes, left with extra documents in his hands, and Christine stood at her doorway, making a long phone call afterwards, clearly receiving specific instructions. Financial forensics, Angela murmured, pulling a notebook from nowhere. Premium materials, professional meetings, apparent government connections. Christine's operation had sophisticated backing. The black sedan answered one question and raised many more. Christine wasn't alone, and whoever supported her had both access and money. That midnight meeting escalated things. The very next morning, a critical community safety briefing was dropped on our doorsteps, printed on the same premium letterhead that had become Christine's calling card. Bold headlines demanded immediate action and compliance. Angela took in a room full of neighbors with calm detachment. Her reading of body language and motive was clinical, even as she acted casual. Larry, this notice and presentation setup looks like advanced social psychology work, she observed, scanning the notice for cues most people wouldn't spot. The community center packed that evening, residents summoned by urgent language that made attendance feel mandatory. Christine ran the meeting like a corporate presentation, complete with PowerPoint, printed handouts, and lighting tuned to maximize psychological impact. Neighbors, recent comprehensive analysis reveals unprecedented threats to community property values requiring immediate coordinated response, she intoned with practiced gravitas. Charts linked crime statistics, property values, risk assessments, and demographic threat analyses designed to trigger primal fear and shut off rational thought. While most sat stunned, Angela's response cut through the veneer. She stood and asked for the data sources and methodology behind Christine's statistics, with a quiet authority that came from years of challenging dubious claims. Responsible decisions require verified methodology. Some of your correlations appear to use incomplete or shaky data, she said. Christine faltered for the first time, pivoting to appeals to official channels instead of addressing Angela's methodological critiques. These are official community safety records compiled through proper municipal channels, she replied, trying to regain control and paint any challenge as a threat to neighborhood security. But Angela's forensic and statistical expertise exposed the manipulation. The presentation was a crafted fraud meant to manufacture consent for increased HOA control. Calling out the bogus statistics wasn't undermining safety. It was protecting the neighborhood by demanding decisions be based on accurate information, not fear-mongering and polished theatrics that manufactured fear. Angela dismantled Christine's presentation with clinical precision, methodical, devastating, and impossible to ignore. This crime correlation analysis uses postal code 94582, she said, but our community is in 94581. You're showing data from a different jurisdiction to justify more enforcement here. A ripple of uneasy conversation ran through the crowd as people realized they'd been fed bogus statistics designed to scare them into compliance. Angela tore apart the property value claims next. The assessment references lacked dates, comparable sales data, and a transparent calculation method. Basically, unverifiable numbers dressed up as fact. Reliable property analysis needs clear sources and reproducible methods, not vague assertions. Christine tried one last gambit, appealing to authority. Mrs. Perez, questioning established community safety protocols could endanger neighborhood stability, she warned, trying to paint Angela's scrutiny as sabotage. Mrs. Roberts, persistent use of fraudulent statistics undermines trust in legitimate leadership. Angela shot back, steady and unwavering. Community strength depends on accurate information and transparent methods, not manufactured crises used to justify greater control over residents' lives and property. The room's mood flipped. Half the people now looked skeptical of Christine's showmanship. The other half were confused, unsure whose version of reality to accept. After the meeting, neighbors approached Angela with gratitude and relief. "Thank you for pointing out those statistical errors," said the woman from Oak Street. Her husband worked in municipal planning. "Something felt off about that presentation, but I couldn't say what." Angela accepted the thanks with quiet competence. She explained that statistical manipulation is a classic intimidation tactic. Create fear, short-circuit rational debate, and push the community toward fear-driven decisions. That night, Angela explained what she'd really seen. Christine wasn't just targeting individuals. She was running experiments in community psychology, testing which groups resisted and which complied. Her assessments were unerringly exact, mapping influence patterns, social dynamics, and who might be swayed under pressure. "Someone taught her how to read and exploit community behavior," Angela said. The chilling question hung in the air. What organization had both the motive and the capability to train suburban HOA presidents in psychological influence techniques? Christine's slip over the wrong county code was embarrassing but telling. What followed made it terrifying. Overnight, Mrs. Anderson woke to find her life shredded online. Fabricated criminal records, fake court documents, phantom traffic violations in states she'd never visited. "They ruined everything I built," she cried, showing us her tablet as if proving a nightmare. Hospitals were calling her employer. Administrative systems were flagging non-existent convictions. Angela dove into the mess like a specialist. Calm, thorough, and alarmingly adept. "This isn't random vandalism," she said, scrolling through falsified records. "These are entries placed directly into official systems using authenticated credentials." She walked me through what she'd found. Records that showed signs of access from verified accounts. Audit trails with user IDs, timestamps, and terminal IDs. Evidence that pointed to insider-level manipulation, not a lone hacker. Whoever did this had the ability to write into government databases, alter employment verifications, and fabricate court documents with authenticated signatures. The scale and sophistication of the attack suggested institutional capability and intent. Angela's response was surgical. Within 24 hours, she'd contacted ISP legal teams, filed formal fraud complaints with state database administrators, and coordinated with municipal records offices to trace unauthorized access. She pulled together audit logs, captured evidence, and pushed for immediate corrective action, work that would have taken ordinary residents months of legal wrangling. "Look at these access logs," she said, opening a laptop and showing methodical evidence collection that read more like law enforcement procedure than a casual complaint. "How can you trace this so precisely?" I asked, awed and unnerved by her fluency. She explained that every database transaction leaves fingerprints, authentication logs, terminal IDs, timestamps, and that pattern analysis and correlation could reveal the responsible accounts. Within a day, the fabricated records were removed, and Mrs. Anderson's professional standing began to recover, restored through channels that required institutional authority. The speed and thoroughness of Angela's countermeasures made Christine take notice. That evening, Christine confronted us, her composure cracked. "Mrs. Perez, your interference with community safety protocols is destabilizing," she spat, barely containing her anger. Angela answered with calm authority. "Systematic database fraud against elderly residents is federal criminal activity, identity theft, record falsification, credential abuse. These aren't community management tools. They're crimes." Christine's posture changed. She clearly realized someone with institutional knowledge had exposed her network's reach and vulnerabilities. "You speak like someone familiar with database security for a county administrative worker," she said, trying to size up the opposition. "I recognize institutional cyber abuse when I see audit trails," Angela replied, unflinching. "You should be asking who provided your network with authenticated law enforcement credentials to carry out identity theft." Christine's confident mask broke. She retreated into the house, immediately making frantic calls. From the kitchen window, I watched her pace and talk for more than an hour, agitated and defensive. Angela monitored the call with small technical devices she insisted were consumer-grade, while taking notes on duration and behavioral cues. Her conclusion was blunt. This wasn't a lone local bully. The operation had institutional backing, coordinated oversight, and a willingness to deploy government-level tools against civilians. That night, Angela framed it plainly. This wasn't isolated HOA bullying. It was a systematic trial of suburban control techniques, backed by resources and access far beyond anything a volunteer board should possess. The scale, the methods, and the speed of response suggested something far more organized and far more dangerous. Lurking beneath our picture-perfect neighborhood, training had taught her to spot organized, institutional manipulation. Someone was using our neighborhood as a laboratory to perfect psychological control techniques that could be rolled out across other towns if the test succeeded. The terrifying question kept me awake. If Christine's network could access government databases to destroy someone's identity, what other institutional weapons could they deploy against residents who resisted? Mrs. Anderson's records were erased overnight, and the technical traces led straight into police systems. Drop a comment if anyone's ever had their reputation attacked online, because what Angela discovered about who can erase your digital life will shock you. Angela's overnight forensic work exposed an operational scale that changed everything. This wasn't petty HOA bullying anymore, but systematic corruption testing meant for wider application. Larry, I've traced identical database access patterns across our neighborhood and 2 nearby communities, she said, spreading a meticulous intelligence analysis across the table. The same authentication credentials, the same fabrication methods, coordinated targeting. Someone was refining scalable control techniques in suburban test sites before deploying them more broadly. Then Angela shifted strategies, slipping into subtle psychological tactics that looked like ordinary neighborhood intuition but were actually deliberate. We're planting strategic disinformation to map their communication and command structures, she explained, assembling equipment she insisted was consumer grade while setting traps that looked like professional surveillance. Organized networks reveal their hierarchies when threatened. False intelligence travels predictable routes, and by tracking those routes, you can expose decision-makers. Her counter-operation nudged Christine's allies into revealing themselves through sloppy reactions to planted rumors. Angela seeded digitally watermarked false reports, federal database audits, witness protection coordination, interstate fraud probes, each item tag so she could trace how it spread. When those items hit the right terminals, they triggered coordination calls that exposed command lines. Within hours, her forensics showed false intelligence moving through specific channels, reaching identified law enforcement terminals and prompting coordinated responses at leadership levels. A false alert about federal audits triggered captain-level police terminal access within 2 hours. An interstate fraud rumor produced interdepartmental coordination calls. The speed and precision made one thing clear: institutional backing, not isolated local action. Her masterstroke was a final false intel package, digitally tagged documents implying federal immunity agreements and witness protection for her household. Panic followed immediately. Emergency calls, frantic coordination. Angela watched network reactions in real time and confirmed her suspicions. The intercepts pointed to Captain Morrison as the operational authority coordinating Christine's neighborhood activities. Evidence that local law enforcement was protecting, not investigating, the harassment. Angela's operation achieved in days what months of complaints never could. Direct proof of police involvement. Morrison's terminal accessed classified databases 17 times during the sting, each access requiring captain-level authorization and leaving traceable fingerprints. That night, Christine tried a last-ditch negotiation, clearly rattled. "Maybe we can discuss cooperation that benefits everyone," she offered with forced diplomacy. Angela answered with cold clarity. "Cooperation requires transparency about your objectives and institutional backing. What exactly is your network trying to achieve with coordinated community manipulation and corrupt police support?" Christine's answer confirmed our worst fears. This was organized extortion disguised as civic improvement. Her corporate-sounding language slipped and revealed the truth. Systematic civilian extortion networks operating with police protection, designed to be scaled across suburbs. Christine's alarm was obvious. You understand operational complexity at a level that suggests law enforcement experience, she blurted. Angela's reply was surgical. I recognize criminal conspiracy when audit trails and institutional abuse point to it. You should be asking whether you're prepared for federal oversight when authorities review systematic misuse of police resources for civilian harassment. Christine retreated inside and made frantic calls that lasted hours. Damage control with people who suddenly realized they'd awakened an opponent capable of institutional prosecution. Then things escalated. Dawn, someone from the network, ordered a tactical response meant to crush our resistance with fake federal charges and character assassination. Patrol units surrounded our home with coordinated precision that felt rehearsed. Search warrant paperwork was polished and intimidating. The listed offenses were wide-ranging and engineered to ruin us. Interference with law enforcement, cyber obstruction, conspiracy, interstate fraud. The goal was clear: destroy our lives through lengthy federal prosecution, regardless of guilt. Angela stayed unervingly calm, letting the officers misread her silence as fear while she cataloged every procedural detail for later. Then she did the performance the network assumed would break us. A convincing public breakdown. Real tears, pleading confusion, bewilderment at cybercrimes she supposedly didn't understand. We just moved here 6 months ago, she sobbed with perfect suburban vulnerability. That act made even seasoned officers uneasy. A few began to doubt whether they were part of a legitimate operation. Sergeant Miller and others systematically planted professional-grade evidence, while Angela maintained the image of helplessness. The planted items were terrifyingly comprehensive. Hacking hardware, fabricated cyber attack logs, falsified federal correspondence, interstate fraud documentation, materials that could sentence ordinary people for decades. But Angela's quiet, believable distress prompted officers to glance at each other, and community members rallied fast. Neighbors poured in to support us with character statements and emergency meetings. The Perez family represents community cooperation, the woman from Oak Street declared. Angela's vulnerability solidified public conviction that we were victims of government overreach, not criminals. Her grateful, trembling thanks, performed as genuine terror, cemented community belief in our innocence and framed the investigation as persecution. Christine watched it all, a nightmare for someone counting on institutional muscle to intimidate citizens. Our public support grew into a wall of protection that complicated the network's plans. Angela had turned their own tactics into leverage, stage vulnerability to expose manufactured charges, community solidarity to thwart institutional bullying, and meticulous evidence collection to prepare for legal fights ahead. In short, Angela's training and tactical brilliance transformed a suburban harassment campaign into a battle against organized, institutionally backed corruption. One that exposed who had the power to manufacture fear, manipulate systems, and nearly destroy lives for profit and control. The community had rallied, frustration visible on their faces, but the effect was the opposite of what Christine intended. Her plan to suppress neighborhood sympathy through systematic character assassination had completely backfired, generating overwhelming support that made any prosecution politically risky for corrupt officials who had overplayed their hand. By day 3, Christine deployed her nuclear option. Gregory Walsh, a corrupt attorney known for intimidating civilians into plea agreements with complex legal documents and financial threats. He arrived with papers meant to terrify suburban residents, disguising a $15,000 settlement demand as a generous federal resolution, enough to bankrupt a typical family while avoiding long prison sentences. Angela held the papers with shaking hands, performing the perfect image of a desperate suburban housewife facing financial ruin. $15,000 for community cooperation violations, she whispered, voice trembling. The sum would drain our home equity and college savings, a reasonable price to avoid multiple felony convictions carrying minimum 10-year sentences. Walsh smirked, expecting fear to force compliance. But Angela's transformation was subtle. As she read the fine print, Her posture shifted from crouched victim to focused professional. Her voice gained clarity and legal sophistication. "Mr. Walsh," she asked, "this breakdown lists $950 for mailbox covenant violations, yet the original citation was $25. What administrative services justify $925 in additional charges?" Her sharp questioning revealed legal expertise and turned the room's power dynamic on its head. Christine leaned in aggressively, following a script designed to pressure submission. "Mrs. Perez, questioning settlement terms after preliminary acceptance could result in a withdrawn offer," she warned. Angela's reply cut through smoothly. "Exposing inflated settlements disguised as justice is every citizen's right." Calmly, Angela walked to the kitchen counter, retrieved the paper shredder, and began destroying the fraudulent settlement documents. "What are you doing?" Christine demanded, her confident facade cracking. "I'm disposing of a criminal conspiracy disguised as a legal settlement," Angela said, her voice now carrying unmistakable authority. The shredder's grinding masked Christine's apparent victory as confetti replaced the fraudulent papers. "You just destroyed a binding agreement," Christine screamed. "I destroyed a fraudulent extortion demand created by a criminal organization impersonating legal authority," Angela replied clinically. "Legitimate settlements require judicial oversight, court documentation, and legal foundation. This was systematic fraud meant to bypass constitutional protections." Christine grabbed her phone, panicked, calling Captain Morrison. "Complete operational compromise. Immediate tactical coordination required. The subject demonstrates professional legal knowledge." Angela watched, satisfied, knowing she'd stripped the mask off an entire corruption network. Within minutes, multiple tactical vehicles surrounded our home, SWAT teams and command coordination confirming the full institutional reach of Morrison's corruption network. Captain Morrison emerged, expecting routine suburban intimidation. But when he saw Angela's professional bearing and the systematic evidence collection, his confidence cracked. "Detective Perez, Internal Affairs Division," he said slowly, realization dawning that this was institutional prosecution, not harassment. Angela stepped forward, badge gleaming, transforming our kitchen into operational law enforcement territory. "Captain Morrison, Internal Affairs investigates suspected municipal corruption independently," she stated, asserting full institutional authority. Christine looked on in disbelief as a suburban housewife revealed herself as the undercover investigator documenting months of criminal activity. Angela opened her comprehensive case file, presenting systematic evidence of organized conspiracy and police credential abuse. Morrison's attempts to rationalize community partnership programs as legitimate revenue and social stability operations fell flat. Angela dismantled his claims with institutional authority. "You coordinated civilian criminal enterprise, abused police database access for identity theft, and deployed county resources for private extortion. Organized corruption under color of law constitutes federal criminal conspiracy, punishable by decades." Morrison's confident facade collapsed completely. County Internal Affairs arrived in unmarked vehicles, agents coordinating arrests with precision. "Captain Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy to abuse police authority, systematic corruption, organized criminal enterprise using government resources, and civil rights violations under color of law," announced Lieutenant Harris. Morrison's network collapsed in real time. Christine watched helplessly as her institutional backing dissolved into handcuffs and federal charges. Christine's confusion revealed her failure to grasp the investigation's scope. Angela explained methodically. "Your network provided a perfect evidence gateway for investigating systematic police corruption. Every community you harassed documented a larger federal conspiracy. Residents realized their support for us had been instrumental in an undercover operation to gather prosecution-quality evidence." Angela addressed them. "Professional investigation of systematic institutional abuse required undercover work to protect your community and build a federal case against corrupt officials targeting you for exploitation. The community stood, applauding as understanding dawned. Morrison's pleas became irrelevant as Christine was loaded into a federal holding vehicle, institutional authority and law enforcement oversight, ensuring that systematic abuse would be met with full legal consequences. Angela's combination of strategic foresight, legal expertise, and undercover professionalism had turned a suburban harassment campaign into a comprehensive federal prosecution, exposing corruption, protecting the neighborhood, and neutralizing institutional criminal networks. Angela responded with institutional finality. Internal Affairs does not negotiate with corrupt officials who violate constitutional rights under color of law. The investigation had secured a complete victory while shielding Oakwood Heights residents from organized corruption masquerading as community partnership programs. That evening, Angela revealed the full scope of her professional background and institutional assignment. Larry, County Internal Affairs assigned me to investigate systematic complaints about HOA-linked police harassment after elderly residents reported coordinated intimidation and financial exploitation, she explained, displaying months of meticulously documented case files. Morrison's network had been using suburban communities as testing grounds for civilian control techniques that violated federal civil rights. Angela's expertise had protected the entire neighborhood while building a prosecution case to prevent similar corruption across the region. With her badge illuminated under the kitchen lights, Morrison stopped giving orders, calculating the prison time he now faced. The community witnessed real authority confronting corruption, and those following this story knew justice was coming. At a trial, Morrison's systematic corruption became public. Local media covered how his organized police networks had exploited suburban residents via HOA harassment and coordinated intimidation. Angela testified in her official internal affairs capacity, badge and credentials displayed, turning what had seemed like neighborhood drama into federal law enforcement triumph. She detailed how Morrison orchestrated criminal enterprise targeting vulnerable residents for private gain under the guise of policing. At trial, Morrison's systematic corruption became public. Local media covered how his organized police networks had exploited suburban residents via HOA harassment and coordinated intimidation. Angela testified in her official internal affairs capacity, badge and credentials displayed, turning what had seemed like neighborhood drama into federal law enforcement triumph. She detailed how Morrison orchestrated criminal enterprise targeting vulnerable residents for private gain under the guise of policing. Morrison's defense attempted to frame his actions as municipal innovation or revenue-enhancing community partnerships. His own testimony revealed the truth instead, an institutional psychology that rationalized civilian exploitation as operational necessity. Angela's cross-examination systematically dismantled his claims. She held him accountable for foreclosures, destroyed family finances, and emotional harm caused under the pretext of enhanced social management. Through Angela's investigation, County Internal Affairs exposed Morrison's regional ambition, franchise-style community control programs leveraging municipal connections to expand systematic harassment across multiple suburbs. County Attorney Williams confirmed that Internal Affairs had prevented a broader organized corruption conspiracy. Sentencing reflected the severity of the crimes and institutional accountability. Morrison received 5 years for institutional corruption, abuse of police authority, and organized criminal conspiracy using government resources. Christine received 3 years for conspiracy, systematic fraud, and coordinated victim exploitation. Network officers received 2 to 4 years for corruption, conspiracy, and systematic abuse of authority. The county judge affirmed, "Captain Morrison, your systematic abuse of law enforcement authority to coordinate civilian harassment is an unprecedented betrayal of public trust and constitutional responsibility." Oakwood Heights became a model for municipal oversight reform. The County Community Protection Act now mandates independent monitoring of community partnerships, prohibits police revenue from neighborhood sources, and ensures county supervision to prevent abuse. Residents like Mrs. Anderson received restitution and established educational programs to help families recognize manipulation tactics. A memorial garden was created to honor victims while celebrating justice, and annual ceremonies recognize internal affairs officers who defend constitutional rights. Angela earned a promotion to chief of the county internal affairs task force, setting standards to protect communities from criminal networks masquerading as civic innovation. 3 years later, Oakwood Heights thrives under transparent governance. Independent oversight prevents extortion, ensures resident protection, and preserves suburban safety. Angela framed a newspaper article about the landmark prosecution beside the now permanently protected brass mailbox, a symbol of accountability and the power of lawful intervention. Professional satisfaction, she remarked, reviewing case files that transformed harassment into institutional justice while safeguarding countless families. Oakwood Heights demonstrates that neighborhoods can defeat exploitation when oversight meets systematic investigation. Morrison's case remains a national standard for identifying organized corruption, systematic abuse, and municipal networks disguised as civic improvement. The memorial garden blooms where Christine once sowed fear, proof that justice not only punishes the corrupt, but also restores hope and community strength.